All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Racial Equity Leadership Network Prospective Fellows webinar. My name is Kanina Williams, and I am Director of Leadership Development at the Southern Education Foundation. In my role, I oversee all of our leadership development strategy, which includes our signature programs like the Racial Equity Leadership Network, or RELN, RELN, as you may hear me refer to it on today's presentation. I am thankful to those of you who were able to join today, particularly in light of the global pandemic that we are currently grappling with. I'm wishing everybody on health and safety in general, but also peace and clarity as you work through the disruptions that you are undoubtedly encountering in your districts. So thank you again for joining. The goal of today's webinar is to provide really a snapshot or overview of the Racial Equity Leadership Network program, including the application process, the fellowship experience, as well as to make time to answer any questions that you all have. So for the next few minutes, I'll start by speaking about a little bit about what SEF does, who we are, and how we do, what we do and how we do it. Then I'll take a deeper dive into our leadership development portfolio, specifically honing in on the Racial Equity Leadership Network, and give some insight into how we try to cultivate equity-oriented leaders. And then we will hear from a couple of our fellows, past and current, and use the balance of the time for any questions. So with that said, we can go ahead and jump right into it. So just a little bit about the Southern Education Foundation. Some of this may be an introduction, it may be a review for others. So SEF was founded in 1867 in the wake of the Civil War, really with the goal of establishing a system of public education for the newly freed Blacks or formerly enslaved population in the South, but also, and also importantly, as an effort to unite Northerners and Southerners behind this notion of a responsibility to educate all people in the nation, no matter what the race is. So really since our 150-year history, we have worked on issues of access and opportunity for traditionally underserved communities. And so today we do that with our current mission, which is to advance creative solutions to ensure equity and excellence in education for students of color and low-income students in the South. We are unapologetically proponents of public education and truly believe that when it's done right, education is the vehicle by which students get their chance to really develop to their full potential and be propelled to the opportunity-rich lives that we think they deserve, or that we know they deserve. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more about how we operate and accomplish this mission. This figure gives a snapshot or overview of just SEF overall, really along 3 dimensions. First, you will see that we operate along the entire P16 continuum, and some would even say P20 because we do some work around workforce development. But we start with early learning all the way through post-secondary and making sure not just students are getting to college, but also through college. So the next dimension is our geography. As you can tell from our name, we are regionally focused, and we approach our work or operate our work in 17 states in which are traditionally considered those in the American South, plus a few states a little north, including Delaware, Missouri, and Maryland. And then lastly, you'll see our strategies, the strand about our strategies. And those really fall into 3 buckets. So our first is research, which we're probably a little bit more known for, which is really understanding and following and keeping our finger on the pulse of what's actually going on in terms of data in our region around education equity and student performance, school performance. And so after research, we have a bucket around advocacy and government affairs, which takes a lot of different forms, but it really is being intentional in the space of policy and public policy development, and making sure we are advancing racially conscious and progressive policies that take into account the unique circumstances of the people we serve. It also includes building this cadre of advocates that are equipped with the data and research to be able to use that to advocate for change. And then leadership development, which is our last strategy, and the strategy that I oversee, which is in a lot of ways an extension of our advocacy work, but in a much more intentional fellowship program and or fellowship model. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So here, before I go into our program specifically, I wanted just to talk about why SEF thinks we can do this leadership development work through RELN. We've had a long history of leadership development, really since our very beginning. Here is an interesting fun fact, is that you see pictured W.E.B. Du Bois, who was actually SEF's very first fellow in 1903. We played an important role in supporting the development of his renowned work, The Souls of Black Folks. So again, leadership development really is part and parcel of SEF's DNA. And I think, it's also only natural that we would be very intentional and continue in this space today. Next slide. Thank you. So investing in leaders. So why are we doing leadership? A little more about why we're doing leadership development as fellowships. So we essentially think that the big problems that we see in our education system require bold leaders that are equipped with the knowledge, perspective, understanding, and skills necessary to really think, act, and engage in a very different way than we are currently, and that will help to transform our education system so that race and class are no longer the most reliable predictors of student success. We think leaders serve as a critical lever for change, and we need a constellation of change agents to really bring to life both the research and the policies that I was talking about that are part of SEF's work. And so we think this is an important strategy, and why we continue to try to invest in building this constellation of leaders. And so with this in mind, we really have two ways that we do this currently. One, briefly, is our Southern Education Leadership Initiative, which you'll see on the screen, and that is our 8-week internship for emerging leaders, so college students, graduate students, doctoral students, where they are placed in education supporting organizations over the summer to really help them achieve their mission, and also get exposure to the different careers in education, and build their understanding about the landscape of education in the South. And this is an important program for a lot of reasons, but I mention it here is because we also try to connect SELI, this Southern Education Leadership Network, with our Racial Equity Leadership Network, and place some of our fellows in RELN districts. So it's our fellows, our RELN fellows, have an opportunity to actually get a SELI intern for the summer. And so on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the actual program that we're here to discuss today, which is the Racial Equity Leadership Network. So RELN, as we call it, was launched in 2017 in partnership with the Learning Policy Institute and the National Equity Project, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a couple of slides. And it is essentially an 18-month cohort-style fellowship designed for school district leaders, executive leaders in school districts, who acknowledge and recognize that they have some persistent disparities and challenges as it relates to outcomes and access for students of color. And they're looking for some tools, resources, capacity building around addressing some of these challenges. So each year we create or bring together a cohort about 10 to 12 fellows from school districts in the South that are committed to addressing and working on a specific equity challenge in their system. Again, I'll talk more about eligibility in a few slides when we talk about the applications, but it is really designed for the C-level or C-suite leader in a school district, so superintendents, deputy superintendents, chiefs of staff, chief academic officers, et cetera. And in this time, the fellows come together about 4 times a year to do some intensive workshopping around high leverage areas where they might be able to affect some change in their districts, as well as their individual leadership, which I'll talk about more in the next slide. And the other thing I will mention is that part of the fellowship is we believe that no change rests on one set of shoulders, one set of shoulders. And so we believe that it's important that the fellow also has a team to support them in their system. So they are required to bring together a team of leaders, 5 to 7 leaders, to kind of support them in addressing this equity challenge. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more about our approach to RELN. We see leadership development, or particularly the Racial Equity Leadership Network, as a double helix of sorts. And so there are 2 strands of learning, engaging, testing over the course of the 18 months. We see one strand that's really focusing on individual leadership, like really working to sharpen a leader's equity lens, their racial equity posture, their commitment to equity work, their capacity for equity work. And then in addition to this personal leadership strand, there's this influencing systems change. So while the person or the fellow is working on really taking an introspective look of how they lead for equity, we are also making sure that they're taking a real deep look or comprehensive look at what's going on in their system. Do they understand the nature and the magnitude of disparities, and what are some of those drivers, and some of the high leverage areas that they may be able to tap into to really force some change in their system. And so we believe that this double helix approach ultimately leads to a vision of equitable systems where a student, again, their success is not predetermined by race, and they're able to really demonstrate developmentally appropriate mastery of like the content, because they are all given an equitable opportunity to learn. So next slide, please. So speaking a little bit more about just our approach, on this slide, you will see what I like to call our North Star of the fellowship, which is our RELN levers. And this graphic offers what we feel are the critical levers or high leverage, important areas where if school systems are operating optimally in each of these, then we have optimized the students' ability to get the education that they deserve. So we think this is kind of like spokes on the wheel, and each spoke is equally as important and should be one that in a paragon of an equitable district, all of these are operating as they should be. So some of the levers include a vision, a district-wide vision. Districts are thoughtfully thinking about resource allocation, both financial and human capital. They're thinking about access to curricula. They are thinking about how are they using their data? Are they making data-driven decision making? They're also thinking about health and safety, inclusive schools, and finally, really thinking about community partnerships. Like the schools can't do it alone, so how is the community supporting the vision or buying into the vision? Next slide, please. And on this slide is just a quick snapshot of a tentative or offered arc of learning through the convenings, throughout the 18 months. As I said, we bring fellows together for 2 to 3 days to do they're intensive workshopping, so they're convenient. And each of these is kind of anchored into the levers. And what we do is allow some focus on what's going on in the individual system, but at the same time, really offering some content and expertise and practical tools around the areas that we think the fellows can work on. And so this is just a snapshot of the ARC. I say it's tentative because we do try to customize the experience based on the needs of the actual fellows in the programs. But high level, that very first session is really about is first getting to know the cohort, getting to know the team that oversees the fellowship, also really looking at the leader as the first critical lever for change in the system. So thinking about your own leadership, and then the next sessions build upon or scaffold upon of what you learned in the first session and start looking at kind of new approaches. And then the third session is more around kind of enrolling people into the vision. The fourth session is really then looking at like structures and interrupting some of the structures that are leading or perpetuating inequities in the system. And then the fellow has some time, 6 months in their district, to go ahead and work on an equity challenge that they have identified specifically for their fellowship experience. And so this is done with some grant support from the Southern Education Foundation, with some coaching, also being connected to technical resources. So like if someone is looking for a communication strategy, someone to help think about an org chart, like we are able to connect with resources around there. And then at the end of that 6 months, the fellows come back together to share out their learnings. One, kind of what they've been able to accomplish, the lessons learned, and how they see to carry the work forward. And so across this whole time, there is ongoing support. There's coaching. Each fellow has access to a number of coaching hours with an individual coach around their personal leadership, as well as a coaching practitioner mentor that can support in a lot of ways. And also we offer webinars in between our convenings for all additional support. Next slide, please. So lastly, I will just talk about our partners that I mentioned earlier. We really were very thoughtful in enlisting the help of some critical partners to help us design and deliver this experience so that it's both meaningful and relevant to our fellows. And it also helps us operationalize that double helix approach to leading for racial equity that I mentioned earlier. One partner is the National Equity Project, and they are largely anchored or tied to that personal leadership development strand. They're really known as thought leaders in this space and bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise. And they also serve as our lead facilitation and coaching partner. And so we're really grateful to have them on in this work. And our other partner that I'll mention is the Learning Policy Institute, who serves as our research and documentation partner. And LPI brings a bevy of research-based knowledge and expertise on school systems change, and will be a valuable resource to all fellows, especially regarding that lever offering or resource that we offer, and that systems change strand. And so I will, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm gonna talk to, next slide please, about the program benefits. That's kind of important. So we hope a lot of things change as a result. I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself, talking about what we hope to achieve in terms of outcomes, but I want to talk about benefits. We think there are a lot of benefits to becoming a RELN Fellow. First of all, it's important to note that we underwrite the cost of the participation of the fellow. So it's not a fee that the fellow has to pay to participate. But some of the things we think are important is, one, just intentional time and space to step away from the day-to-day pressures and demands of the roles that district leaders hold, and just to be able to be intentional and thoughtful and practical about really thinking through some of these equity challenges. We bring, like I said, the coaching and the technical assistance. We try to give opportunities for exclusive networking and learning engagements. So different conferences that we will take our fellows to, bring access to different thought leaders in the space. But one of the biggest, I think, benefits, and hopefully our fellows who are on that are speaking will echo this, is the network that we're building. It's like this opportunity to connect with this supportive community, learning community that understand the challenges that you're facing, who can empathize and can also serve as practical resources for each other. So we think that's one of the biggest benefits of the program. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what we hope fellows will accomplish. So we know ultimately our goal is that we are really informing and shaping education just so that schools are able to better serve students of color and low income students overall. And so we're hoping that each fellow will be able to do some sort of systems change throughout the course of their fellowship. You know, we don't expect to solve all the problems, but at least be able to give the resources to start to see some change. But overall, we hope the fellows will come, one, be able to benefit from this space and what we think is a safe space. And so you come and you renew and you heal and get sustenance as an equity leader. And more importantly, not more importantly, equally as important, we hope that you are able to sharpen your racial equity lens, getting a much deeper understanding of what are the drivers of inequity in school systems and levers that we can pull to change these. We hope that, again, that there are additional tools and researches and coaching so that you're able to sustain the work and go forward. And really though, we hope you are much more able to really engage and enlist allies in addressing some of the work, to know that you don't have to do this alone, be able to leverage your data and your role authority and personal courage in order to influence and advance policy and practice change. And then ultimately, we hope to see that there is some support and strategy that we've helped to support in really advancing and changing or transforming policy and practice, and advancing policy and practice that is more equity centered and gives rise to more student well-being and deeper learning outcomes for all children. And I have one more slide. Next slide, please. So just quickly, the application process. So the application is currently live and accessible on the Southern Education Foundation's website. Though it is a competitive process, it is an open application, so there is no no need for nominations or invites to apply. We do say or ask that it is, or open the fellowship to be eligible, you should be a C-level leader in a school district in the South, because that is a region, and that you have demonstrated some commitment to reducing inequities in your system. On occasions, we make exceptions around the role and geography, but those are on a case-by-case basis. So if there are any questions about eligibility, if they have a question about if they should apply, they should reach out to me directly. And it's not an especially onerous process. We ask some personal information. We ask some data about each district that is applying. And then there are a few short answer questions that allow the applicants to tell us more about their interest in the fellowship, as well as why and how their district could benefit from being selected to participate. We do ask, if you are applying, that you should be ready and committed to attending and fully participating in all 5 sessions, and also be willing to pull together or assemble a team within the district that serves as this kind of task force to help you work on a specific equity challenge. One important note about this application, the platform we use requires that all answers be submitted in one session. So we suggest using and make available a Word version of the application, and we recommend that that's completed in advance. And of course, that doesn't have to be completed in one sitting, but complete the Word version, and then you go ahead and use that to copy and paste your answer in the actual application form. And so the application is due May 1st, 2020. But, you know, I do recognize that we are in unprecedented times right now, and that they are, to say they're competing priorities would probably be the understatement of the year. So if this deadline is a hardship for any reason for anyone, they should reach out to me personally. And so that actually brings me to the end of my comments. And I will actually turn it over to what I think is the most important or valuable part of this webinar, is to hear the experiences of actual fellows. So you will first hear from one of our RELN alumni. It is Dr. Lamar Gorey. He's superintendent of Caddo Parish Public Schools in Shreveport, Louisiana. And then you will hear from one of our current fellows, Dr. Dawn Myers. She's Chief of Policy and School Support in Clark County Public Schools in Athens, Georgia. So I will turn it over to Lamar first.
Thank you very much. And Kanina, thanks again for the opportunity to share about my experience. A little bit about Caddo Parish and about how this experience was unique to the work we do in Caddo Parish. You know, we're a system of about 40,000 students, right under 40,000. And of those, about 70% are growing up in homes of poverty. From a racial perspective, we're probably about 70%, 75, well, about 65% minority, being African American in general, about 5% Hispanic, and probably about 30% white. But what I will tell you is that the economic divide is probably along the same lines as the racial divide. We don't have a large population of poor white children, even though we do have those mostly in our rural communities. We see that most of our children of color represent the large population of economically disadvantaged children. I think it's important to add too, though, is that we are a huge district in land mass, being over 900 square miles in makeup, and yes, 900. And, you know, if I left my office and went to the school that was farthest away, it would take me about 45 minutes. So a huge body of land. We have rural schools. We have traditional neighborhood schools. At the same time, we have some of the highest performing magnet schools in the state, some country, home to 17 National Blue Ribbon schools. But at the same time, too, we have a group of schools that we've labeled our transformation zone schools that I would argue are some of the highest poverty schools in our country. One thing that the RELN opportunity did for me was it really provided a conversation for the entire organization around what equity really means. I think it's oftentimes easy for organizations to hide behind the minority children that are in our magnet program, or they're in some of our special pops, and let that represent what we're doing for minority children. But this RELN experience forced the professional development around what are our real numbers and how are we really serving with children of poverty. And that happened very early on. You know, if you were to ask me what was my richest part of my experience, the interesting thing is the PD. This is some of the highest quality professional development that I've ever experienced. Every time I left, I came back with activity, idea, thought after thought around how I would engage my people in the conversation. And again, these were practical activities that are not the same ones that we do in workshops or at conferences that we attend. This was very unique, very well thought out, just very customized to the work of really promoting a better agenda for children of poverty and of color. So that was really a great part of the work. Moving forward to my racial challenge, we really did hone in and spend a lot of time making sure that I was looking at something that would be meaningful. Love how this is unique to your school district. So it's not like, you know, they have a bunch of ideas in a hat and you get to pull one. It's really about what is grown from your conversation, what is grown from your work, what is the area where your district needs the most work. And, you know, I think in a district as diverse as ours, it came down to teacher quality within transformation zone schools versus what does that look like in a non-Title I school. And did a lot of empathy interviews, did a lot of work around that topic and how can we actually improve that. But I do feel, the professional development, everyone they put in front of you, it will be first class, and will provide first class information, will be a resource even after the presentation is over. So the connectivity of this network, this connectivity of friends, even as we've gone through this coronavirus pandemic, my cohort has a constant text message, and we're texting every single day. So creating a network of educational leaders across the country that will always be there to connect with each other and to support each other as we go through creating better opportunities for children, with emphasis, of course, on our poor and our minority children.
Thank you so much, Lamar. Like I said, I think I couldn't have said any. Obviously, I have not been a fellow, so I could not have said even it any better. And so I appreciate you sharing your experience and all that you've shared about the benefits. One question for you, just before we move on to Dawn. What can you share what wins, if any, or changes that you have experienced that you've been able to attribute to your experience with RELN?
I'm going to start out with something as simple as a dyad, which is a means of communication that was taught to us through railing. And this is a way of really creating an organized thought conversation within staff. My staff uses this all the time. And I do think this think time, this listen time has really helped us not to run over people's thoughts with solutions. And I know that sounds simple, but that has been such a win for my organization. I think when you look at the facts around how we are addressing and how we're developing policy to support having high quality teachers in front of all children. And when you say all children, your emphasis is where they aren't, and they were not in some of our Title I settings. So the way we're building that conversation and bringing everyone along with those policy changes that do involve money has been huge. And RELN has definitely provided the courage and conversation to move forward with those policy changes.
Nice. Thank you so much. I really am really grateful again for you to be on and to share your experience and all the gleaming things that you said about RELN that I did not have to pay you to do. So I appreciate that.
I'm just sorry I don't look superintendent perfect like that picture.
No, totally appreciate it. Again, thank you. And so we'll have some time at the end for any questions and answers for both of our district leaders, but I want to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Myers so she can share her experience.
Great, thanks Kanina, and thanks for inviting me to be part of the call. I remember a year ago when I was on this webinar listening in and considering my application to be involved in the RELN cohort. So I have learned so much in the last year, and I appreciate the opportunity to hopefully encourage others who are either listening in or will listen to the recording to apply. So a little bit, you can see on the slide about our school district. We're just under 14,000 students. And I listened to Lamar's square footage. We are only 100 square miles, sorry, not square feet, square miles in our county. We're the smallest geographic county in the state of Georgia. So we're pretty high density. We're more like an urban school district, even though we're not in metro Atlanta. Our demographics are about 49% African-American, 25% Hispanic, and 20% white, 4% multiracial, 2% Asian. We are 100% free and reduced price lunch. We serve all of our students free breakfast and lunch, and we have very high poverty. But then on the other side, our teacher population, and this is not dissimilar to many school districts, I know, we're 74% white school teachers and only 22% African-American teachers. So we have great disparity in between our teachers, and great racial disparity in between our teachers and our students and their families. So we have many opportunities for equity challenges in our district, many. Let's see. I can share with you what my equity challenge that I'm working on with my team right now, and then I'll talk a little bit more about why RELN has been so helpful in that process. The equity challenge is to address the use of out-of-school suspension, which is currently very disproportionate for our African-American students, especially African-American males. And just a couple data points to illuminate that. And I guess I could say before RELN, we knew these data, but we didn't know what to do about it. We have, as far as African-American students in our district, 50%, I mentioned 49, 50% enrollment, but they represent 80% of our students who are disciplined. And then when you look at intersectionalities and you add the male African-American factor, so you cross males and African-American males are 25% of our total student enrollment, but represent 52% of all of our students who are disciplined. So these data show that we clearly need to be paying attention, and we have been, but kind of without much direction and without knowing the what and the how. We know the why, of what's broken, and we just don't know what to do about it. So RELN has been so important to me as a leader, to have thought partners like Kanina mentioned and like Lamar mentioned. It is lonely in leadership, and anyone who's listening who's one of those C-level leaders or a superintendent knows it's easy to put your head down in your own district and not find the time to connect with other peers and to build a team that is really at your same level of leadership. So for me, having that team and the thought partners has really helped with the lonely factor. And you know, I was looking through, we all keep journals, and so this is by my bedside. I write in this all the time. We were given so many materials, and I will say SEF is so generous with books and materials and resources. They make being part of this process so easy. My journal has become something really valuable to me personally, and I was looking through ahead of the call, and I wrote down a quote about equity leadership. And it's certainly applicable now in the face of this pandemic, but it says we're living in complex times and are part of complex systems, and that our past experiences and training may not have sufficiently prepared us to understand and respond in our role as equity leaders. And isn't that true? And I look back at my degrees from very well-renowned institutions, from the University of Georgia, go Bulldogs, and you know, I think of all the time I spent reading and learning and in class and in fellowship with professors and reading the literature, and I still am insufficiently prepared for the equity challenges that I face in my district. And so I think that's absolutely true. The complex times, the training we thought we had is insufficient, and RELN helps fill some of that gap. And the way that it does it, if you are part of this cohort, is with resources, with the opportunity to slow down. And I would say that to anyone thinking of applying, I think there's a certain personality that really does well. You have to embrace coming into a fellowship experience and shutting down your world for a few days. And I would say you'll get more out of the experience if you're able to do that. Those who can disconnect and purposefully turn off their phone and turn off their computer and be very present with the learning will get more out of it. And so that's been important and helpful for me to intentionally slow down and reflect and journal. I knew about journaling, but I'd stepped away from it professionally. And RELN helped bring that back into my professional life. The coaching, like Lamar mentioned, everything we do as a cohort, and it took me a little while to catch on to this, that like what we're doing, we're meant to replicate, but it's the most wonderful modeling experience. So you get to practice as part of the cohort, and then you go back and you can do that in your district and with your teams. We've been introduced to new vocabulary, new models, new ways of thinking about equity leadership that have been really very helpful to me. I take back those models and the slides. And like I said, the generosity, everything that we do is ours to take back and reuse. And so the National Equity Project has such high quality, like Lamar said, high quality tools. And you don't have to go back and prepare slides. You have your slides for your next meeting. You might add your own spin or you reorganize them, but the resources that are made available to us, I just can't tell you how much of a time savings it's been for me, because I don't have to cull through all the equity research and materials to find what fits. I've already worked with the materials and I just come back into the district fully charged and ready to go when I return. I would say RELN has changed my approach. We talked a lot in our district about systems change, and it's challenged me because I've come to realize this is not about systems change. This is about changing disposition that leads to systems change or system nudge. I'm not even sure we're ready for system change when we talk about equity. I think sometimes we talk about it at this grand scale where we're going to focus on equity and resolve some of these issues that have been created over hundreds of years of disproportionality and discord. And so it's not about changing a system. It's about nudging towards healing, less about fixing, more about understanding, more about listening. This process has slowed me down from thinking I'm a change agent to thinking I just need to slow down and listen and understand and encourage my team to do the same. So all of the design thinking and modeling about this, the how to get to the equity work has been so powerful for me. The wins that I've had personally, I mean, I can just share in my district. I am a chief of policy and school support. It was interesting back when we were thinking about who was going to apply last year. Kanina had met my superintendent at AASA and asked him to apply, and he and I talked because I also had heard about it. And I kind of said, one of us needs to apply. This is so important. We need this work in our district. And what I'll also share is over the course of the year, our superintendent has left our district, and we've had some really unsettled times. The importance to the RELN Fellowship for me has allowed me to continue the equity work. Our superintendent came in as kind of the equity superintendent in our district, and he brought so much, and he opened our eyes in so many ways to the important work. But as we all know, leaders change in a district, and I'm so thankful to the grounding and foundation of my RELN cohort and the learning that I've had, because I've been able to maintain the equity work in our district, even in light of big, significant leadership changes. So to me, it's just been invaluable. I don't feel so alone. I have cousins like Lamar and DeAndre and Rebecca. So across cohorts, not only within our cohort we talk to, but we talk about our cousins and the opportunities to meet cousins and share with those who have come before us, and hopefully those who are going to come after in this next cohort. It just gives you a really good sense of grounding in the work, and that we're not alone, and we come from different states and different size districts, and we have somewhat unique challenges, but we share so much. And I just can't thank enough Kanina and Reagan and all of the folks from National Equity Project of the fellowship that this has provided for me. And in these times that we're facing with the pandemic, even more so, we need people who we can trust, who we fellowshipped with, who we've cried with and laughed with and had really important conversations. We've slowed down enough to build meaningful relationships. So I don't know what I've missed, Kanina, but I just can't say enough for what this experience has meant to me personally.
I'm just glad you let me go first, Kanina. Awesome job. The only thing I would change is I'd say go Tigers.
Oh, see?
No, that was fantastic. Like, I really couldn't have literally asked for anything more. It was so open and just authentic. I really appreciate you sharing your experience, Dawn, and I thought it was important to hear about from both a alum and a current fellow. And so I can't thank you both enough for sharing your experience. And again, like, I can say all I want to say and tell people why I think they should apply, but I think nothing compares to actual testimony from people who have had the experience. So I really do appreciate it. And so thank you both. That brings us to the end. We'll have some time for Q&A that will open up, but just on this last slide, if there are any inquiries, you could reach out to me, obviously, Kanina, the Director of Leadership Development at kwilliams@southern-education.org, and also my colleague, Reagan, who supports our leadership development work and helps to keep me on task at all times, because I would not be on task without her. And she's Reagan Johnson. She's my program associate, and she's R. Johnson at southern-education.org. And I just want to also thank Reagan for keeping us running smoothly on this webinar today too, by advancing the slides. So if we have a few moments for questions, if there are any questions.
Rick or Kanina, I just want to offer, if anyone would like to contact me by email or by phone, I would be happy to talk to anyone who's, thinking about their application, thinking who from their district might be the best fit to apply, or just has any other questions. I'd be more than happy to speak to somebody over email or telephone, and they can reach out to you for my contact information, or you can provide it.
Right, and I'd offer the same thing, of course, too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it probably, again, I think we cannot explain just how valuable I think that that is. So I don't think we have any questions at the time. So that will bring us to the end of our webinar today. We thank everyone that has joined, and please feel free, again, don't hesitate to reach out should you have any questions. And also, our fellows on have offered themselves as resources, so please do contact us to connect you to them should you need to. And thank you again, Dawn and Lamar, for all that you shared today. And everyone stay safe and sane and self-care during this unprecedented, uncharted territory that we are in. And thank you for joining.
All right, flatten the curve.
Yes, let's do that.